Oh, there's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with another episode of In Other Words, an occasional series where I talk about words that I encounter in my reading. That's the short version. Phrases, grammatical patterns, idioms, stuff like that. Here are another half dozen for you. And now that the YouTube search function has just become a joke, I realized that these episodes, which I've been putting out for a couple of years now, are not that easy to find, so I have created a playlist. So if this is your jam, all 17 of you, there is now a handy-dandy little playlist where you can watch them all. The first one is from a very academic work of Canadian and Indigenous history called Liberalism, Surveillance and Resistance, Indigenous Communities in Western Canada, 1877 to 1927, by Keith D. Smith. I got a lot of great information out of this book, but it was a rather dry academic treatise. There was one word that interests me and I want to talk about, and I don't know if I know how to pronounce it actually. Usufructuary. Say that 10 times. And that comes from the noun usufruct. Usufructuary is maybe adjective. It's a big highfalutin word, but once I started digging into its origins and whatnot, it was pretty interesting. So a usufruct is a legal right accorded to a person or entity, party, that gives them the temporary right to use and derive income or benefits from somebody else's property. So the right of use and derivation of income is temporary, it's limited, and you find it in many jurisdictions. I said usufructuary is adjective. It could be, but it's also the noun usufructuary for the person that holds that right. The right itself is the usufruct. So basically, if we said it in simple English, which I know is not my strong suit, or this is a legal term, it's not a lawyer's strong suit, is the right to use or enjoy something. And built into this kind of contractual or whatever thing is that you cannot damage the property. The usufruct came into English in the 1610s, not 1600 to 1609, but in the 1610s, from late Latin, usufructus, which in Latin, usus e fructus, means use and enjoyment, going back to use. So use is the common word that is etymologically related, and fructus means enjoyment, and fructus is related to fruit. Oh my goodness. All of which goes back to the Proto-Indo-European root brug, meaning to enjoy. I don't know how you pronounce it, that's the spelling, and the derivatives of this root often get connected to agricultural products. Brug is found in a bunch of words that we use quite a lot, including brook, the meaning of brook meaning to endure. I cannot brook, you find that in Shakespeare, right? I cannot brook your impudence or whatever. I cannot endure it. Defunct, fructose. So there's fruit, right? Fructose, frugal, fruit, fruitcake. What did you just call me? Fruition, function, fungible, perfunctory, tutti frutti. Oh, come on. And usufruct. So let's look at the fruit one, because that's pretty interesting. Fruit, any vegetable product useful to humans or animals. That was the original meaning. It included vegetables. In English, from the 12th century, from the Old French fruit, from the Latin fructus. And the Latin fructus meant an enjoyment, delight, satisfaction, produce, fruit, crops. And going back to the stem, meaning to use or enjoy, going back to the same Proto-Indo-European root, brug. Moving on to the 1760, I believe, 1758, 1760 novel Clarissa, which I've been reading since it was published. I've been reading it for a year and a half now, maybe. Samuel Richardson. And lots of great old vocabulary. And so this one I've long been curious about, and that is anon. Anon is an adverb that means straight away, right away. And originally it was two words, on an, not an on, but on an, which meant into one, which, if you think about it, means continuously, straight away, at once. When it's a short reply to somebody's request or command, anon means at once, coming. That was from the late Old English period, but by the early 16th century, it had kind of shifted a bit, and this etymological dictionary says it had been misused such that it came to mean soon, or in a little while, not at once. In Romeo and Juliet, Juliet's nurse calls her and Juliet replies, "I come anon." It's connected to, it incorporates the word one. So let's look at one, an adjective, a pronoun, a noun, being but a single unit or individual, being a single person or thing, or the number one. From Old English around 1200, going back to Proto-Germanic, Old Norse, Danish, Old Frisian, Dutch, German, Gothic, and that goes back to the Proto-Indo-European root oino, however that's pronounced. Here it is, meaning one or unique. Interesting, I didn't know this. The original pronunciation of the word one was as it is in these words, only, atone, alone, own. So it was pronounced own. And also in the dialectical words gooden, young'un, un. So own, only, or un. That was the original pronunciation. The now standard pronunciation, one, didn't come about until the 14th century in Southwest and West English, and didn't become the generally accepted pronunciation until the 18th century. So, the Proto-Indo-European root, oino, however that is pronounced, we find in the words I've mentioned, plus an, Angus, 11, inch, lonely, null, ounce, triune, unanimous, unilateral, union. I think some of those are pretty obvious. Let's get out of the 12th century and let's go to some very modern lingo, which came my way by one of the best novels I've read so far this year, Detransition Baby by Tori Peters. And in this novel, there is a word that I didn't know, Edgelord. Let's look that up. And Edgelord, it was a little bit difficult for me to pin down, but basically it's very modern lingo, which is why it eluded yours truly. And it comes from the idea of being edgy, but it's a sarcastic word to refer to somebody who is trying too hard to be at the cutting edge and to be provocative and bold. It originated in online forums. Don't be such an edgelord. Somebody that was overdoing it, trying too hard to be edgy, to be cutting edge. If you don't know, Detransition Baby is a fabulous novel about trans women. And in the novel, edgelord is used as a term of derision to refer to a rich, privileged trans woman who I think is a singer, and she has titled her CD or her promotional posters have the word tranny, which is really pejorative, and she is denounced by some of the main trans characters in the novel as being an edgelord. So somebody who is provocative to a fault. A few from this 1950 novel from the UK, Tea is So Intoxicating by Mary Essex. It's a novel that I didn't love, but it had its moments, and it's part of this new series, the British Library Women Writers series, but it had some great vocabulary. The first one is Logia, which I didn't know how to pronounce until I did the research, and if you don't agree with my pronunciation, that's what the internet says, please correct it. Early in the novel, tea is described as having been laid out on the loggia, and I think I'd seen the word but had never bothered to look it up until now, and it is a gallery or room that has one or more open sides, especially one that's part of a house that has one side open to the garden, which makes sense in the description. And that is an Italian word that is used in English. It's the Italian word for a typical American-style porch. Originally, loggia in English referred to a roofed galley used as an open-air room, properly on the first story or above. And the same word with the same spelling is obviously in Italian, but goes back to French, Loge, which is connected to the much more standard English word lodge, which has a very different meaning in English. The word lodge came into Middle English in the mid-13th century in surnames and place names, and it meant a small building or hut. And it goes back to the same old French word lodge, Loge, meaning an arbor or covered walk, hut, cabin, going back to Frankish, German, Proto-Germanic. And there is one theory that one etymologist has proposed, but the rest of his peers don't agree, don't think it's that clear-cut, that says it goes back to the same Proto-Indo-European word from which we get the word leaf. But that is a huge etymological controversy, and I will not take sides. However, if it's right, then the word lobby is also part of that same word family. Lobby in the mid-16th century meant a cloister or a covered walk, and of course in more modern parlance is a large entrance hall in a public building. That meaning first occurred in English in the late 16th century. Let's move on from lobbies, leaves, and lodges and get into Sean the Bookmaniac territory. One of my favorite words in English, souse, is found. Somebody's soused in the novel. I don't need to read you the sentence, but souse, as you probably know, you've probably used that word in connection with some of my videos, means to be drunk. But in fact, most dictionaries don't even mention that meaning, but that's the meaning I always knew. If you were soused, you were drunk. But it means to be pickled, steeped in vinegar, so you can see how it came to take the inebriated meaning. And souse, for that meaning, came into English in the late 14th century, going back to Old French, Old Frankish, Old High German, and it goes back to a Proto-Indo-European root, sal, meaning salt, which you can kind of see the connection. And that Proto-Indo-European root has also given us these words: halogen, salad, salami, salary, saline, salsa, sauce, sausage, silt, and souse. Let's choose one of those. What the heck does halogen have to do with salt or something steeped or pickled? We need to look a little bit deeper into that one, I think. Halogen is the general name for elements of the chlorine family, Came into English in 1842 from Swedish. A Swedish chemist, Baron Berzelius, coined it, and it means salt producer. So chlorine and salt. If I knew anything at all about chemistry, I would probably get the connection. And that goes back. So what's the connection between chlorine and halogen lights? I'll leave that to the... Doris, can you explain it? I'll leave it to the scientifically literate crowd because I'm just completely lost. And finally, this Irish novel from 1921, Vocations by Gerald O'Donovan. Not a completely successful novel in my experience. However, there was some great vocabulary in it. And this one, and don't smirk. But I smirked when I read it and noted it and researched it. So I'm going to try not to be rude. But the phrase is ejaculatory prayer. And I'd never heard this phrase. I mean, if you read any literature from the early 20th century, especially British literature, and 19th century literature, probably earlier, you find the verb ejaculate used in ways that, don't have anything to do with sexual matters. Just to mean to suddenly, a spurt of language that comes out of somebody's mouth. So you can see the connection. It's a torrent of verbal utterance, right? So an ejaculatory prayer is the same. I mean, it just sounds terrible, but let's sober up here, people. In Christian piety, an ejaculation, sometimes known as ejaculatory prayer or aspiration, is a short prayer in which the mind is directed to God on any emergency. A sigh, a devout aspiration, a holy ejaculation will oftener pierce the sky and reach the ear of omnipotence than a long, set exercise of prayer. So within Roman Catholicism, some common ejaculations, Jesus, I'm trying to get through this, people, include the Jesus prayer, the Fatima prayer of the Holy Rosary, Come Holy Spirit. Okay, I give up. You get the point. I can't do it. I did my best, people. So that is my episode of In Other Words for today. Thanks for watching.